Hello, everybody. Happy Loki premiere day. The first episode has finally aired. It seems we've been talking about this for goodness knows how long, but it's called Glorious Purpose, and what a glorious treat it was. And I'd like to say there's another premiere today, and that's me as host of SJU. So we're celebrating a double whammy of firsts.
Wow. Both highly anticipated, really. The fans are going crazy for this.
So the panel today, stellar panel. We've got Danielle, Radford, and Lon Harris.
Hey,
hi both.
Oh, good morning.
So we're talking Loki.
I wish we had some Loki charms this morning.
Oh, I'm sure we can arrange that for you, but maybe not till after we go off air. We're talking Loki with full spoilers today. So if you haven't seen it yet and don't want it spoiled, click away now, but bookmark us because you are going to want to come back later. What an incredible premiere episode. I thought so anyway, on the whole. What was your overall impression?
I really enjoyed it. I guess we'll get further into it, but I love the look of it. I love the feel of it. I love the humor. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this first episode, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Lon?
Yeah, I wish I had more of a contrast to make this more of a lively debate, but no, I thought it was great. Really enjoyed it, and I really liked. It seemed for a while like they're kind of setting it up almost. It feels almost procedural. It's like, well, there's this agency, and there are these time criminals, and here's the team, and we're gonna go get them. And I was enjoying that. It's got like a Dick Wolf almost kind of feel, but then it does kind of pause to be like, there are some crazy mind-bending ramifications to this scenario that it kind of glosses over at first. And then by the end of the episode, it kind of stops to be like, wait, like Infinity Stones don't work here. Like this place makes no practical sense. And I really like that contrast. Like, I feel like if that's the show that we're being pulled between like time crime of the week and then like crazy thought process of what it is, what the TVA means for the MCU is a really fun back and forth, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the criticisms that I may have and that I've heard has been that there was a lot of exposition in the first episode, but it was necessary. And didn't they do it in a fun way? I thought.
Yeah, I would say the This Is Your Life part of the Loki thing maybe went a little too long. But other than that, it was really, really fun. And it led to that important moment at the end where Loki, we get some Loki crying, which is always good. A little bit of emotion.
You gotta have some Loki crying.
So before I get into that, go on, Lon. No, you go first because I was just going to say highlight.
It's interesting that these Marvel shows, they're so much about creating these little self-contained worlds. Like they do impact that there are hooks into the larger story, of course, but they're kind of always, they kind of have to seal themselves off in some way so big things can happen to these characters, but we kind of end up where we started so that we can plug into the next movie. And I feel like they've got a very really clever one here because it really is like it's a pocket universe. They can kind of do whatever they want and it like makes sense because it's in this little side corner of the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel attached to this Loki? Because it kept striking me that he's a variant away from the sacred timeline. Which kind of detached me a little bit from him. Did you feel that, or?
Well, they speed through the development that we got to see in those last few movies where, we get to see him and Thor and kind of their reconciliation. And so that's the other part, I think, of the This Is Your Life, is to get us back to that Loki that we see that is more vulnerable, that does care more about his family. So because of that, towards the end, I felt more attached, but I was definitely like, oh yeah, this is like old Loki. This isn't the same Loki that we watched go through that great emotional journey. But they did manage to get us there by the end of the episode. So then I was hooked in.
Do you think it's
Yeah.
going to be a redemption arc? Another one for Loki? Or, I
Sorry,
mean, either of you, or do you think that that they're gonna, you know, pull the rug out from under us, and it's gonna be something entirely different? He will reveal himself to be the wily Loki he always was.
No, I think this is going to be another redemption arc because I think that this is what people want to see from Loki. I think that we like the trickster stuff and we're going to get the trickster stuff. But I do think that this is going to be another one where he solves it. And then at the end, I think there'll probably be, I mean, it's hard to say after only one episode. There'll still be some Loki trickster stuff in there, but I do think that this is going to be an opportunity to tell the story with him, where at the end of it, we do see a big change in him. I'm hoping.
I mean, I think this is one of our first opportunities to really see a story that's from his perspective, even in the times when he's been sort of helping the hero or working with the hero, like your Thor Ragnaroks or whatever. He's not the hero. The hero's Thor, and we're like, we don't know about that guy. Maybe he's on our side, maybe not. But this time, we're kind of exploring these questions of identity from Loki's perspective. Like, does he feel like the him from 2012 is the him he's watching in the future play out things that haven't happened to him yet? Like, it's kind of asking these questions, but from the character's POV instead of us asking it about him externally. So it is kind of the redemptive journey, like kind of like Danielle was, or both of you were saying, that we've seen before, but like from this altered POV.
This first episode really kind of unpicks rather than unpacks Loki, doesn't it? It tells us a lot about what he's not, but doesn't tell us much about what he is. So, you know, I'm hoping that as the series goes on, and as we will presumably see him actually confront himself, we'll get a good look at what actually drives the real Loki.
Yeah, I'm hoping. And they did a lot of that work in this episode with the, like, why do you enjoy killing people? Like, why do you enjoy hurting people? So like you said, we're already starting to unpick that lock. And it's going to be, as Lon said, interesting to see all of this from his point of view so that we can start to see, like, other than, you know, wanting to take over the world, what does this Loki want? And the answer previously has always seemed like it's love and acceptance. But maybe that's not going to be what it is in this. Maybe it's going to be something completely different. And I'm excited to find out what that is.
How do you think it compares to what we've seen so far from the other Disney Plus MCU shows?
Go ahead, Len.
I mean, I think, you know, in kind of what I would say, like they're all kind of creating these little bubbles, these little pockets where they can sort of play around. I feel like this one has the most efficient sort of version of that. And I also feel like it's really helped that this one has the most like lively character with the most like joie de vivre. Like, I think a thing that was for me kind of holding back, especially in the early episodes, both shows kind of dealt with this over time, but WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, they were kind of suffocating early on. They were about these characters who were going through all this trauma and grief and processing all this really weighty stuff. And like, I get that because we're coming out of Endgame, but it's kind of nice to be in a show that's about a character who's having fun. And even if he's in this kind of dire situation, is kind of bringing some liveliness to it. So I enjoyed that. It does feel more talky than either the WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldier pilot, but I'm feeling like we had to get some of that out of the way before.
Yeah, because there's a lot of explaining to be done. You've got like this whole kind of fantastical bureaucracy, and they just keep saying the names of everything over and over again to really hammer in, like, this is what it is, this is what the show is, this is what the TVA is. So yeah, a lot of talking in this episode.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit. It's like, it's definitely got a Kafka-esque side where it's just like this endless nightmare, bureaucratic, almost like hell, if hell were just this huge, impossible office building. But it also, did it remind you guys a little bit of Beetlejuice? There were times where I felt like this is almost like going to see Juno. You got to bring your handbook, and it's like the afterlife is like this endless office nightmare.
See, for me, that took me to The Good Place, like immediately took me to that kind of, again, the fantastical bureaucracy, which I didn't realize that that's a genre that I really love until this show. So kudos, Loki.
Yeah, it definitely has that feeling of like the opening of The Good Place, where you just like you die and then you're in a waiting room. Like it's that, which I guess is also a Beetlejuice vibe, but it's like it definitely has that feeling.
I think it links, going back to sort of talking about comparing it with the other shows. While I felt like the tone was really different to both Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, but WandaVision I felt drew on Legion quite a lot for its for certain things. So dealing with mental illness, for example, and the boldness of the leap that it took, or the big swing, as Paul Bettany kept calling it in interviews, and in this it really kind of leans heavily into the aesthetic of Legion, which was also this kind of indeterminate time period, had that kind of retro future styling, which looks great.
Oh yeah, I love that, also, the retrofuturism.
Legion is clearly like a touch point for a lot. Like I feel like Legion was not like totally watched when it was on, but it's been a massively influential show to a lot of what's come after. Also, the interesting, like the Legion connection, was also a character we're seeing like the interior of his mind and how like pop culture influenced everything is, like Legion's like Bollywood dance sequences or whatever, like very similar to WandaVision.
It's interesting you mentioned pop culture, because I feel like in a way one of the themes of this is looking at antagonists in pop culture, I think, and kind of making a sly kind of nod at this fan concept of the Marvel villain problem. And it's really looking into what is a villain and what's a hero, which is interesting.
And yeah, like the fatalism of being a villain, we never see these villains confront the fact that inevitably they have to lose every time for the stories to work. It's almost like Megamind is almost playing around with this idea, or like Venture Brothers, like the Monarch, where it's like, in order to be a comic book villain, you have to just be your Wile E. Coyote. Like you fall off the cliff every time. It's how the story has to end. And it's fun to see the character like confront that in an emotional way, because we really rarely get to see comic book villains do that.
Yeah, having that moment of glorious purpose, that was in his kind of reconciliation with the fact that it's like, no, sorry, like you're a cog in someone else's story, like you said, really resonated with me.
What were some of your specific highlights in the episode?
Oh, and I say I was going to originally talk about the bureaucracy thing, but I also I really like the Miss Minutes. I love the humor of it. Miss Minutes was really fun. But yeah, that was the big one for me, was hitting on all of those bureaucracy hit points. And what else? Sorry, I took notes. Because there's a lot of there. Plus, I love the multiverse teases. I love that we're getting to learn a lot more about how this multiverse worked. I liked the timekeepers when Loki calls them space wizards. Things like that really stuck with me.
I thought one of the things they did so well was how slowly it dawns on both Loki and thus the audience how powerful the timekeepers are. Like at first we get that, okay, the collar, they've got like the New Mutants collar where you can't use your powers. Okay, and they got the time sticks, whatever, that can send you back through time. But you don't get at first that it's how sort of universe shattering their power is. And it's like the way that it very gradually, until there's just a drawer that the guy doesn't even understand its significance, that's full of alternate versions of all of the Infinity Stones that we've spent an entire franchise chasing down like they're the ultimate of everything. And the fact that it built up to this moment and it's so casually thrown out there, knowing what an impact that's going to have on us, the fans, it's really well done. That's really good stuff.
It is.
And I also thought, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to say, I also thought, I mean, Hiddleston, we know, is so terrific as Loki. Obviously, that's not news. I thought the whole supporting cast, it's a really small cast because it's not that, it's a big place, but there aren't that many people making it run. And all of the casting was just so good. I mean, Gugu Mbatha-Raw's terrific and Owen Wilson's great. It's a fun world to spend time.
I was going to say that the whole concept of the timekeepers and the TVA existing was one of my highlights and lowlights, because what they do with that is undermine the Herculean effort that the Avengers went to discover time travel. Which totally kind of dismisses what went before, and also makes me excited for what's opened up in the future. I mean, it feels a little bit like they might be teeing up another multiversal war.
Well, I mean, I assume that's going to, in some ways, inform Multiverse of Madness. And so, I feel like now we're kind of laying the groundwork of there is going to be some kind of multiverse conflict that comes up that Doctor Strange is going to have a hand in untangling, along with Wanda Maximoff, almost definitely.
Yes. Yeah, and they'll all come together, maybe, the shows. That Casey, I wanted to mention Casey, the character of Casey, that he's kind of like got this Jimmy Woo vibe. And he has some of the funniest lines in the episode. I loved him. And it says about the Tesseract, off camera, it sounds dumb, which I loved. Again, undermining everything that went before. Eugene
Cordero, he's a comedian.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did he go down well with you guys?
Oh yeah, I thought that he was hilarious. I always love kind of that behind the counter bumbling person, and he's like, oh, they took out my cart. All of this stuff happened. Clearly, none of this can be my fault. Plus that whole what's a fish? He was going to turn me into a fish. He got to have some of the great moments of the episode with just some of the great lines that they gave.
They are the show really is in some ways setting up a lot of questions about identity and existential crises. All of these characters having these deep questions, because the information that we've gotten about who these people are and the nature of their existence is very kind of fuzzy. It's they were created by the timekeepers. They never leave. Their whole lives are behind these desks. There's something unsettling, and I feel like we're gonna delve a little deeper into that, of Loki starting to get these people or whatever they are to start asking questions about who they are and what role they have in all of this. Because obviously there's a moment where you see Casey just pick up the Tesseract. We know we've seen a human touch. I mean, Tony Stark in the Iron Man armor has to be careful about touching it. This guy so obviously he is a powerful being in some way. And I feel like that there's a lot there that could potentially be unpacked. Probably, maybe, or not.
Maybe I agree with you. And on that, I was going to say about you to pick up on your, you said about it being unsettling, and there is this undercurrent of unease, isn't there? Almost menace. And I think Owen Wilson kind of plays that really well, because he's Owen Wilson. He's funny, but we don't know much about him. And he asks all these probing questions, and he kind of says, I'm a huge fan. And then at the same time, he's trying to, get Loki to do something, or I don't know what his ulterior motives may be. That's really interesting. And I wanted to highlight the score, Natalie Holt's score, which was brilliant at kind of announcing itself and also enhancing what was going on and helping to kind of create this sense of unease.
There was definitely some dread in that.
Yeah, sure. What about lowlights, actually? What did you not like?
Yeah, I was going to mention too, I I didn't like that they mentioned Coulson and then don't kind of mention. I get that like Agents of Shield is a thing that doesn't really matter, at least to the larger scope of this, not to the people who obviously enjoyed it and loved it. But I thought that it was weird that you would bring up Coulson and then never be like, oh, and by the way, like this thing that you did that brought them together, also he was alive. So.
I really don't have like, I wish they hadn't done, like, I mean, I agree that it was odd to bring up Coulson and then not throw it in Loki's face that he never even knew that Coulson came back. Like, you would think that would be the move for Owen Wilson there.
It's just really
my only real thought on it is like, it is very like talky, like maybe some way to kind of move or even hold one of these beats for a future. Like you could maybe hold Owen Wilson and his little like defending your life machine for episode 2 or something, just to kind of balance it out, give us more. Like they do set up a very tantalizing, like, here's the big bad for this season, and maybe it's this alternate version of Loki, which is great. But like maybe give us a little more of that in episode 1 and some of the self-reflection for later, just so you don't totally overburden it, because it is very like a few rooms and like a few characters talking for most of this first episode.
I have a question for you about the final scene when the Minutemen get, what should we say? Well, burned, I guess. The cloaked figure at the end, do you think that was the Loki variant they're looking for, or somebody else? And if so, who could it be?
I think it's somebody else. I'm going to go ahead and this is going to be so dumb. And because we've already done this, we've been around this clock before. I'm going to say Mephisto.
Wow, nice.
Just, we've already done this. I know that I'm putting myself out there, but just from the way that the child in France, I think they're in France, pointed to the thing of the devil, which obviously Loki does have the horns, but that was my first thought, was like, maybe that could be something. So I don't know. It could be Loki. We could find out at the end that it does wind up being this like evil variant, or it could be that, but I don't think I'm right, but I do think that that was one of the guesses that I had. If it's not going to be Loki, it was going to be that.
Oh, they're doing this on purpose now. I'm not sure if it's gonna turn out to be Mephisto, but they are toying with people.
Yeah,
not very nice.
Like, it's not very nice. I agree. But when the kid points to the devil, you're obviously supposed to think of maybe, whoa, Mephisto tease. Like at this point, they know what they're doing, I'm convinced. And they're either wanting us to theorize it or they're setting it up for real. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The director, just on that, the director has debunked this idea, but I don't know. That makes me feel more that it probably might be.
You can't trust any of these bastards. They're a bunch of liars. But I think it just, to me, it feels like we've done the doppelganger thing a few times already. Like we just did it with Vision, where part of the big WandaVision finale was Vision has to fight a version of himself. But we've also seen a few of these characters now have to do that. And Nebula fought a version of herself. Cap fought a version of himself. And it's just like, is that a big enough climax of this, of Loki fighting a version of himself? I think they're going to have to go one step bigger. And the TVA thinks it's a variant of Loki, and we're going to have the rug pulled out from under us and find it's some other threat.
I was wondering if it could be Kang the Conqueror, because he is, in the comics, an enemy of the TVA, and is obviously the villain in Ant-Man 3. Maybe they could introduce him here.
I feel like that would make total sense as like a little tease that we get in the last episode, that he's been, I don't think he's like Jonathan Majors is going to be like a regular in this, but like, could they drop that in the final episode? For sure. I think that seems likely.
I wondered, there's a cat in this episode. Is it a Flurkin? Is it a descendant of Goose?
In my dreams, it is.
I mean, it could just be Goose, right? I don't know how long Fleur can live.
Changed color though, but that's possible, I suppose.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It's a different color. I didn't remember that.
But there's a tesseract. The tesseract's there for it to eat again.
Well, I mean, at least there's a scroll in the background at one scene. Like, obviously, this is, they're interacting with that world still. So sure.
And another question I had around, I don't know if you guys would know this, but the lift sequence. We got a good look at the floors, the names, the numbers of all the floors. Have you deciphered them yet?
Not yet, no.
That's not my game. I wait for the comic readers to figure those codes out, and then I just read their tweets. I don't know. So I'm sure there is, though. I bet there is something.
Yeah, there will be. Then it's never done by accident, is it? It's always by design, things like that.
No, I'm sure there were a bunch of clues and Easter eggs that I just don't get. I don't know the comics well enough.
Well, I pause there. I'm going to say thank you to everybody for watching. As always, subscribe to our channel for videos, please, every weekday. Give us a like and hit that bell for us. And I think now we're going to move to some questions from the live chat. So, okay, James Bunt wants to know, what underused MCU character do you want in the series? For him, it is Sif.
Ooh, Sif's
in this series?
Yeah.
Like in this series specifically? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Gotta think about what would make time. What would make sense.
Maybe I would like to see more Howard the Duck. I'm desperate for more than just a cameo from him.
I think this is a perfect opportunity to explain how Earth actor Matt Damon wound up in Asgard to appear in Loki's play. So let's get him in there.
Ooh, that's really good. I'm going to need help with names here because my memory is terrible, and this is a name that I should know. So there are two of this actress in the MCU. We've got in Nick Cage, and then in Captain America: Civil War. Lon, can you help me out with this? We've got two.
Luke Cage?
Yeah.
Oh, Alfre Woodard?
Alfre Woodard. I want to know about the two Alfre Woodards.
Yes.
That would be what I would want explained. Thank you. Sorry, my memory is today.
Like Mariah. Yeah.
Right. She's the like city councilwoman in Luke Cage and the grieving mother who accosts Tony Stark in Civil War.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want an explanation.
Presumably the same person, I guess. Different names, but she's crafty. She could have come up with a cover story.
Exactly.
Yeah, she did die in Luke Cage, didn't she?
Yeah.
But
also, who would be better to work at the TVA than Luis from Ant-Man? He knows the history of everything. He's a great storyteller. He'd be perfect in Owen Wilson's job.
He is a good storyteller.
Just like, yo, remember when you did this and then this? Here's I have the video. Let's show it.
And just sign these, please.
And just let's Michael Pena. Let's just put him in more things so he doesn't have to do another Fantasy Island.
Okay, another question from Slavaton Rock. Is that how we say it? Slavaton. That's it. I've got no more. Do you believe the creators wanted to make a statement on or send a message to internet trolls with Loki's explanation about why he hurts people? Are we already that meta?
I don't think so. I think that this was mostly just to get to that vulnerability and again kind of close that loop of we didn't get to see that character progression, and so now we get to see him have kind of a reckoning with himself about fear and his relationship to power.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time the internet assumes everything is like directed, like inspired by the conversations that have been happening on Twitter and Reddit. Other than Jared Leto's Joker saying we live in a society, which is an example, I think usually the internet is like overthinking its role in a lot of this stuff. I think it's probably more like what Danielle was saying, that this is a natural. We need to see this version of Loki, who is the unredeemed Battle of New York Loki, have the same emotional journey that the Loki we know already went on. And this was a tight and efficient way to do it in one room in a few minutes instead of over the course of several films.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know about that Loki's explanation about why he hurts people specifically, but I do think they're trying to address this criticism about their villains historically through Loki, through the series. And I think there's a lot of self awareness in this episode, a lot of self-reference, and kind of this awareness about the fandom and what they're saying. Definitely, you know, I think that the sacred timeline, for one thing, also stands in for it being a sacred thing to the fans, not just in universe. You know, we love this main timeline. I don't think we want it, you know, kind of retconned. And things like Mobius has a line where he says, slap it on a t-shirt, you know, and probably that quote that he's referencing is already on a t-shirt somewhere out there. And maybe slap it on a t-shirt is slapped on a t-shirt too. I think it's full of references and awareness to itself. References to itself.
Well, there's definitely, it is a, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a comment about this series having this continuity that we've been following, you know, throughout. Like, I think it's impossible to get away from the fact that defines all of these Marvel shows and films, is that we're all, you know, they're all holding to this one central sacred sort of timeline. There's definitely a self-awareness about that going on in all of these shows, not even just in this show.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something I used to dislike. I would say it's something that I like in this. Yeah. So that's almost it from us, everybody. Thank you for joining us. But just time to leave you with something that you won't want to skip. Our own Eric Goldman chatted with the cast of Loki, including God of Mischief himself, Tom Hiddleston, and Mobius Owen Wilson. And they both shared some fascinating insights, actually, a lot about Loki. So it follows after we've gone. So given that you probably don't want to wait any longer, it's bye from us. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Lon.
Always a pleasure.
You know, Loki, of course, has had a lot of loyalty issues over the years. And one thing we asked fans recently at Fandom about your character, I'm curious what your answer is what do you think stands out so far in terms of what is Loki's biggest betrayal that we've seen in the films? And what do you think is his most heroic moment to date?
Without getting too deep, probably the biggest betrayal of himself, where, you know, I think he's his own worst enemy in lots of ways. But the image that comes to mind is I think, in Thor: The Dark World, pretending to pass away and then not actually in fact passing away at all, and then usurping the throne. And that, I mean, as far as betrayals go, that's a pretty big one. I find the sacrifice in Infinity War very moving when he refers to himself as an Odin's son. But I think the big moment is when in Ragnarok he turns his fortunes around and gets on the ship and arrives back in Asgard to help save his home with his brother at his side.
It's hard with a character that, you know, is so beloved and, you know, is that people have, you know, seen for 10 years to break new ground. But I think in this show, there's some, you know, sort of new colors for Loki to play, and I think that those are going to be really surprising to people, and even to my character a little bit shocking.
In the show, you know, we really sort of explore the idea that nobody is really completely evil, nobody is really completely, you know, perfect, and so I think that that's the kind of cool thing about, you know, having that gray area, that you've got somebody sort of who's just human. Well, he's not even human, but, you know, he's he's just sort of, you know, has those human qualities of being flawed and complicated.
Owen Wilson versus Chris Hemsworth, very different energy. Was that kind of fun to have Loki bounce off of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we've worked with Chris for 10 years and it was completely immediate and instinctive, our chemistry. And you know, we sort of, our lives changed at the same time and we grew into those characters in a kind of easy way. But it was so wonderful to have Owen Wilson come into this because he has a kind of curiosity and a wry sense of humor and an intellectual detachment that makes him a perfect foil for Loki in a completely different way. So suddenly Loki's fractious energy is bouncing off someone who's kind of nonplussed by Loki, and all of Loki's tricks don't work on Mobius. And Owen brought all of his gifts and, you know, his comedic intelligence and his insights actually as a writer. I think he brought it all to play here. I think he's brilliant as Mobius.
So what was it like for you and Tom to kind of establish the dynamic between the two characters?
Well, I think a big part of it, you know, they did a good job in the script, and but it was probably before we started filming and just Tom kind of taking the time to sort of walk me through the whole sort of Loki history. And I think that was really valuable. And I mean, it really was sort of like being in class, being in a great class, but I was sort of taking notes, and some of the notes I took just on the way Tom would sort of articulate stuff, I thought was, you know, had a very kind of, was very vivid and memorable. And so I would kind of sometimes work that back into actual scenes that we did together.
You mentioned how he could be his own worst enemy. You know, we had a clinical psychologist, a real clinical psychologist, do a profile on your version of Loki. And a couple of things she mentioned was that Loki expresses contempt towards others and relocates his own shame, and that to avoid the feelings of being damaged by others, Loki creates his own chaos. Does that kind of mesh with some of your feelings about the character?
Very insightful. I think that's a very insightful analysis. Yes, I think all those things, and most likely he feels quite small and vulnerable, but rather than be honest about that, he needs to make others feel small and vulnerable in order to distract himself from his own vulnerability. It's like he kind of evacuates his pain onto other people. Yeah, as repetitive, compulsive patterns go, it's not the most healthy. I think, yeah, he could do a little bit of work in processing some of that, and taking responsibility for his actions and his choices. But maybe that work is coming around the corner. You know, he's been apprehended by the TVA, and there's some hard truths to confront.
Mm-hmm.